Anos is an ugly, lonely demon king that is reborn as an overpowered baby. As he tries to reclaim his throne, he face slaps all his bullies and rizzes up multiple baddies in the process. 2,000 years ago, in the mythical age, a single man wiped out the humans, spirits, and gods, and was revered as the demon king of tyranny. Now in the present, Telsgade, a school built to train his descendants, expects the demon king to resurrect and be among the school's applicants this year, hoping that his return will bring joy to the realm. On the day of the entrance examinations, a dense, ugly weirdo named Misha has a meet-cute moment with the obvious main character, Anos, as he hands her the envelope she dropped, and her family cheers her on to finally land a man. As they walk forward, Sepes, the son of the Indus royal family, tries to roast them for looking like children. But they ignore his meaningless existence, which angers him, causing him to summon his magic flames of darkness, as he tells them to beg for their lives. But Anos uses his breath to blow out his tiny flame and orders him to stay in place, which leaves him stuck under the spell. After, he enters a tiny room where an owl tells him the first test will be a duel between examinees, explaining that only 5 winners will be admitted to the school after all the tests are done. Later, he heads into the arena for his battle and is matched with Sepes, who promises to wipe the smug look from his face, so he tries to use his compulsion magic again, but his anti-demonic armor reflects it. The duel begins and Sepes brings out his magic sword, which amplifies his magic power. However, as he rushes forward to attack, Anos blows out his flames again, calling the sword a fake, and says such a miserable failure shouldn't be facing him in the first place. Then he tells him he'll defeat him without moving an inch or using any magic to prove this. And before Sepes gets a chance to attack, he starts bleeding everywhere as Anos uses his heartbeat. However, Sepes refuses to back down, calling him out on relying solely on his compulsion magic. So Anos uses his face as a doormat and takes him up on his challenge to make him surrender without using compulsion magic or loot as if he can't. Just when Sepes thinks he's cornered him, Oreos snaps his fingers and obliterates him, but immediately uses a resurrection spell to bring him back. The students are shocked to see this, but Sepes still refuses to give up and goes through a gruesome loop of dying and coming back until he finally gives up and cries. Next, the power assessment test begins, and each of the students gets scored after touching a magic crystal, with Misha scoring over 100,000 points, which he praises. However, when he touches the crystal, it breaks apart from his overwhelming power, which she notices using her demonic eyes. Next, they head for the aptitude test, where they're asked questions to test what they know of the founding Demon King, including his name, and he breezes through the test. Afterward, he finds Misha waiting for him and invites her over to celebrate getting in, so he teleports them home. When they go inside, his airhead mother congratulates him for passing the test even though he was born just a month ago. But after noticing the ugly troll standing behind him, she panics, knowing her son can do better. But his dad is proud he could land any babes at all. Later, they have dinner, and she asks her future daughter-in-law what she likes about him. And when she says it's his kindness, she starts to plan the wedding. After dinner, they enjoy a rather romantic stroll and he apologizes for his over-the-top parents, but she says she has her fair share of idiot guardians. When he asks about her parents, she says they're around, but they try to avoid her ugly face as much as possible. After seeing the pity in his eyes, she tells him he must really be kind, but he laughs and tells her that's a first, as everyone else hopes he'd drop dead. Upon hearing this, she tells him to stop and bend down, and just when he thinks he's about to get some, she pats him on the head and seals him in the friend zone. Suddenly, an iris spell is cast, causing a wall to form around them, creating another arena. But before they can move, a man emerges and introduces himself as Demon Lord Leorg, Sepes' older brother. Then Sepes tells him that hybrids shouldn't be able to beat a royal, assuring him that his brother is more powerful. But before he finishes mouthing off, Leorg grabs him and tells him that he's a worthless weakling with no future prospects and electrocutes him. After, he faces Anos and tells him that purebreds are directly descended from the Demon King and cannot be insulted by mere dog shit like him. But Anos responds by saying that bloodlines don't matter, which angers him, calling it an insult to their founder. However, Anos claims to be the founder himself, but Leorg calls cap and signals his men to attack. But with just one look from Anos, their magic circles begin to malfunction, causing a huge explosion. So he decides to unveil a forbidden magic, Origin Magic, and launches his attack. However, Anos comes out unscathed and explains that Origin Magic has no effect on the Origin, and is disappointed by his inexperience. Then he resurrects Sepes into a zombie, scaring the shit out of Leorg, and when he tries to attack, he sees his magic has no effect on him. So Anos tells him that if he can join forces with his brother, they can take him on together, but he's too scared of getting his brains eaten and remains frozen in place as Sepes uses a fiery attack to burn both of them to a crisp. The arena starts to crumble, so he uses powerful magic to shield them while he blasts the ruins away. After resurrecting everyone, he says he's disappointed with how weak his descendants have become and reveals that he's the true Demon King and founder, Anos. In the mythical age, he had secretly met with the hero Canaan and his party as he was tired of the constant fighting, so he proposed a plan to separate the four realms with a door in between that would be sealed shut. However, this would cost him his life, but he would be reincarnated in the next 2,000 years. After Canaan chose to trust him, he cast a magic circle, fueled by the other hero's magic, while Canaan plunged his sword into him, promising that they would be friends if he were reincarnated too. Next, Anos opened his eyes to see his current parents, and just before they could name him, he told them his name, and they shit themselves. In the present, Misha tells him that he's been deemed unfit to be a demon king, so when he wonders why this could be, he asks her for the founder's name, but she says they aren't supposed to speak his name. So he extracts it from her thoughts, and she says Avos. He realizes it's the wrong name. Afterward, their homeroom teacher introduces herself as Amelia and informs them that the class will be split into teams, saying that anyone who wants to lead a team must be able to use the troop magic guise to boost the group's overall power. Then she asks for volunteers, and students begin raising their hands, and so does Anos, but she tells him that hybrid students aren't eligible to participate. So he proposes that he'll prove that hybrids aren't inferior to royalty, and she warns him that if he fails, he'll be expelled from the school. So they seal the deal with a Zek contract. Then he turns to the guys and asks if it was the royal family that drew it up, and when she confirms this, he tells her that it's flawed and adjusts the circle, making it 2 times more effective. Although she can't believe her eyes, she has no choice but to let him participate and tells all the leader candidates to introduce themselves. At this, Sasha introduces herself as a witch of destruction and a direct descendant of Ivas, one of the elder demon emperors. Then Misha reveals that she's her older sister, and when he asks why she's in a white uniform, she simply says it was a family decision. When it's his turn to introduce himself, he tells the class that he's the true demon king of tyranny, and they've all been believing in a fake name. Afterward, the class splits into teams, with most students attempting to join Sasha's team, and no one but Misha and Anos. Then she comes over and points out that his only teammate is a defective piece of shit, with no soul that was animated by magic. After realizing that's why she's so ugly, he says he doesn't mind since she's a doll, but asks what her excuse is. So she decides to teach him a lesson and activates her demonic eyes of destruction, causing the walls to break. But it has no effect on him, and he shows her that he can use the same magic too. Since she doesn't immediately shit her pants, he commends her on her magic level, and asks if she wants to join his team to bond with Misha, but she says she doesn't consider her family and walks away. After classes, they run into her again, and she challenges him to a team duel, saying that she'll join his team if she loses, and he'll obey all her commands if he loses. A week later, the 2 groups meet, and she and Misha open a Zek contract to enforce their wager. Then the teacher announces the match and states that the game will end when the leader is knocked out or unable to maintain their guise. After, Misha sets up 3 castles, which Sasha sees, so she decides to strike first, but before she can deploy her vanguard team, her surveillance picks up Anos, who appears right in front of their castle. Even though she wonders how he got there so fast, she remains confident that he can't do much damage while he's solo, but he continues to walk toward the castle. When she sees this, she informs him that the castle has been fortified with multiple layers of anti-magic spells, but he tells her she has no idea what she's dealing with as he reaches through the barrier and lifts the castle with one hand. When she asks how the he can have this much power, he tells her that he's the main character and throws them in the air. After catching the castle, he spins it on his finger and tosses it aside as he wonders if he went too easy on them. Finally recognizing his strength, she instructs the team to use their ultimate fire magic, Geograze, to defeat him, so they band together and give her all their magic, and she launches a huge fireball at him, but he counters with a small fire projectile from his finger, which instantly dispels their attack, breaks through all her shields and obliterates her castle. When he appears in front of her, she asks how he was able to use Geograze by himself, but he tells her that was the most basic fire spell, reminding her that he's him. After losing, he tells her to honor her promise, but she uses her demonic eyes to try and end him. And after he cancels them out, she promises to grow stronger and end him. Then Misha rushes over to make sure she's okay, but she tries to ignore her existence and finally agrees to honor the contract, and when she asks him if he recruited her for Misha's sake, he turns on the Riz and tells her it was because she had the most beautiful demonic eyes he'd ever seen. Afterward, he returns home, where he introduces Sasha to his mom, who can't believe her son is into polygamy, while his dad cries tears of joy for bagging 2 sisters. After dinner, Sasha asks Misha if she likes Anos, and just after she says yes, he arrives with a parting gift from his mom and walks them home while the girls hold hands. After reaching their residence, Sasha stays behind to thank him for getting them to make up and tells him to come closer. However, he hesitates, not wanting to get his hopes up like the last time, but after she kisses him, he's glad that he was finally able to get some, and thanks her. Sasha remembers her previous conversation with Misha, where she denied having any feelings for Anos, but said she had never met someone with the same eyes as her. Then she confessed that when they were little, Misha was the only one who would visit her, which helped her control her powers. So she apologized for being and asked for her forgiveness. The next day, Misha asks for his advice on a gift to get Sasha for her birthday the next day, but Sasha interrupts by joining them since they're now a team. Then, she asks if her former teammates can join his team too, but he refuses cause he's only into ugly girls. Later, Amelia tells the class that Ivis will be coming to lecture them. So Sasha explains that after the founder had used his own blood to create 7 subordinates, they built the school to develop future demon lords. Upon hearing this, he wonders how his own subordinates don't remember him, just as Amelia tells him to be on his best behavior. Then she welcomes Ivis as he walks forward. Anos asks him if he remembers him, but he says he's lost his memories from 2,000 years ago and only remembers the demon king of tyranny. After realizing that he has no idea who he is, he grabs his face and uses a spell on him, but he still doesn't remember. So Anos says they should revisit the matter later. As the lecture on fusion magic goes on, Sasha reveals that she already knows the technique since it's a family technique, so he asks her if she's close to Ivis, but she says she's only spoken to him once. Later, he talks to Ivis and reveals that after using his spell to take him back in time, he realized that someone has tampered with the past itself, which is likely the one responsible for his lost memories. Since Ivis has no way of confirming this, he remains neutral and leaves while Amelia hands Anos a badge that Misha dropped. So he finds her to give it to her and notices her holding the same letter from the entrance exams. Later, the class begins another team competition to collect magical tools for points, but as the rest of the class rushes in, he tells them that they only need to find the scepter to score perfect points, revealing that their test site is actually his castle. So he leads them through his castle and tells Misha that she can pick out something from the treasure room for Sasha. But after asking, he discovers that her birthday is also of tomorrow, making them twins. When they reach a dead end, he says it's a secret passageway and walks through the wall of bricks like it was never there. So they walk forward and get to 2 large doors with anti-magic protection, but he pushes them open with his bare hands. Once inside, Sasha holds onto the scepter, while Anos shows Misha the treasure room, and she picks out a phoenix robe for her. But when he catches her staring at a ring, he asks if she wants him to give it to her, but she says no. After striking out, they head back, and she presents the robe to Sasha, who loves it and wants to try it on, causing Anos to leave the room again. However, when he comes out, he sees Misha has been stabbed, as Sasha claims it was all an act to take first place in the dungeon exam and says she wants nothing to do with an ugly doll. Anos remains calm, pointing out that if that was the case, she wouldn't have used such a tame method, so he calls bullshit and tells her to stop throwing a tantrum, but to prove her resolve, she revokes the Zect, which he notices should not have been possible. So she uses conditioning magic on Misha to make sure he saves her while she gets away. But before she can fly off, he grabs her and reveals that he already healed her wounds immediately he saw her. However, Misha wakes up and asks him to let her go, and she escapes, while he asks her to explain what the is going on. Then she says that she's going to disappear at midnight, and when he asks if it's because she's a magic doll, she says it's because she never existed. So he guesses that she and Sasha were originally the same person, which he suspected after Sasha destroyed her Zect, which is only possible if it's with oneself. Then he tells her that 2 years ago, a similar spell was cast to separate one soul into 2, and asks if Evin is behind this. When she confirms this, he says such spells are unstable as the two eventually go back to being one. So she continues her sob story about being invisible all her life, since everyone knew she'd disappear, up until Anos liked her hideous face and became her friend. Upon hearing this, he realizes why she wouldn't let him hit, and hugs her, assuring her that he'd make her wish to make up with Sasha come true. Then they teleport to Sasha and Misha tells her that she wants to know if she truly hates her. But she immediately challenges Anos to another duel, promising to answer her question, if he can control a magic circle she creates. So he agrees, and she goes to work on creating 2 simultaneous magic circles. And after she's done, she tells him that he only has to control the magic circle that syncs 2 sources. After he realizes what she's trying to do, he syncs the 2 sisters, winning the duel and causing Sasha to reveal that she's always been grateful to Misha for staying by her side and hated that she spent her life alone. With her plan to use the second magic circle to make Misha the original, she tries to get Misha to reject her to fulfill its conditions. However, when she tries to activate the spell, it fails as Misha refuses to reject her and tells her that she'd be happy to become a part of her once again. Anos interrupts and reminds them that he's him, and would rewrite the past to make it so that they were originally 2 separate demons by sending their sources back in time 15 years ago. Then he sets up a guise to share his magic power, but he tells them that since it's origin magic, they need to believe in him as the founder for it to work, and they agree. Suddenly, Divin appears and slashes through him with his blade, revealing that the 2 sisters were prepared to be a vessel for the founder's awakening. But Anos blasts him away with a fireball, calling him predictable, and throws the blade right back at him to get him out of the way. Then he begins his spell and takes them back in time, but is suddenly stopped when they appear in a strange dimension, as the guardian god of time appears. He tells them they'd be punished for breaking the rules of time, and pulls Ivan into the dimension, rewinding his wounds and giving him the power of a god to defeat Anos. So Anos sends 3 fireballs at him, but Ivan slows down their time and evades, countering with strikes from his swords that bounce off a protective barrier. As the girls ask him to save himself, he tells them to trust him, but Ivan stabs him with his sword and causes him to vanish, while he confesses that he'd been planning this moment since 2,000 years ago. Suddenly, Anos reappears and reveals that ending him is not enough to make him die. But as Ivan wonders what the fuck that even means, he teleports and casts a spell to stop time, freezing the girls in place. However, Anos continues to walk forward like the boss he is while Ivan attacks with all his strength, but he swats him away like a fly and tells the girls that he'd make their wishes come true if they further the plot with him. Then the girls break free and say they believe he's the awakened Demon King, which completes the spell, sending them back in time to fuse with their original sources. Meanwhile, Anos tells Ivan that he's about to kick his ass as he summons his demon sword and slashes through him multiple times till he disintegrates. Afterward, he resurrects Ivan, who now recognizes him as his master, and gives him his real memories. Then he tells him to investigate who might have stolen his memories, starting with the remaining elder demon emperors. After he leaves, the girls appear, and they all head out of the castle just as the sun begins to rise. So the girls make up, and after he puts a ring on Misha's finger, he wishes her a happy birthday. Sometime in the past, Anos watched as a girl got wet and summoned a water hydra that blasted an attack, wiping out his forces. But as he was about to wipe it out, Shin stopped him, saying it was beneath his standards. So he took on the task instead and wiped out the hydra with one blow, asking for permission to be resurrected as a reward. But Anos warned him that since he wasn't good at source magic, he'd resurrect without any of his memories or skills. But he didn't mind and agreed. Suddenly, they spotted Kenan, who was known for resurrecting every time Anos ended him, as he possessed 7 sources. Then Anos told Shin to find the Great Spirit Reno, while he faced off against Kenan once again. In the present, Amelia announces that a transfer student, famous for being a prodigy swordsman, will be joining the class. Then she says that Anos' team would only be awarded 70 points from the dungeon exams, as the scepter they submitted was stolen before it could be appraised. Immediately, Sasha complains that the decision is unfair since it was the Academy's fault, but she insists that the decision was made because there were several possibilities. However, Misa also snaps back, saying they're only treating them that way because he's a hybrid, but she tells her to shut the fuck up if she doesn't want to be punished. Then, Anos comes to the rescue again and walks to the front of the class, where he pulls out the scepter from one of the students and hands it to Amelia, telling her to do a better job at sabotaging them next time. Embarrassed, she then tells the class they'd be getting sword lessons from two of the elder demon emperors, Gaius and Idol. Later, Missa approaches them and thanks him for sticking up for her. Then he asks why Emilia was especially bitchy toward her, and she explains that she's part of the Unitarians, who campaigned to unify the royals and the hybrids. Then she invites him to meet them, saying they all believe he's the Demon King and are backed by one of the elder demon emperors. So they head to the Union Tower, and she introduces them to the Anos fan union. But as soon as they lay eyes on him, they start fangirling harder than at a Harry Styles concert. While they look around, Sasha finds Anos porn and is immediately heated up, so Misa explains the book was meant to service the fans. After, she takes them to a room and shows them half of a sword her father left for her on her 10th birthday, explaining that he's probably a royal and cannot afford to be seen with her, as is the case with all the girls there. So she asks him if they could join his team, but he tells them to prove their resolve. Later on, the students struggle to pull out their tools while Gaius and Idol tell them that only the students with a strong pull-out game will be allowed to compete in the tournament. So Sasha asks Anos if he's also struggling with his tool, and as he summons a sword, he tells her the only tool he's ever struggled with is a special sword made by humans, spirits, and gods to defeat him. At the same time, Lei also pulls out a sword, so Idol rushes forward to challenge him, but is quickly knocked the fuck out, just as Anos knocks out Gaius and points out that Lei was holding back. Later in class, Lei refuses to be a team leader and instead asks Anos if he could join his team, but when he refuses, he asks if a kiss would change his mind, but Anos says he doesn't swing that way. Then he suggests that Lei and the Unitarians work together to defeat him in the next competition to prove their resolve. The next day, both teams get ready to face off, and Misha instantly builds a large castle, which makes Sasha wonder how she became stronger. Then, Anos teleports to Lei and notices his tool isn't as hard, so he admits that he gave it to Misa earlier, just as a giant fighting castle emerges with a large tool. So Anos says he'll take him on with his stick. As Sasha struggles to evade the attacks from the castle, Anos radios in and tells her to use Geo-Graze, and when she wonders how just two of them can pull it off, he tells her to trust him and do it. So Misha prepares the cannon and links to Sasha, who fires a huge ball of fire, taking out the castle's core. Then Misha tells her their new power must be a result of fusing with their past sources. But while she's distracted, Misa sneaks up behind her to attack. Meanwhile, Lei gets his ass handed to him, and they exchange powerful strokes, but Anos commends him for being able to learn new styles on the go. Back at the field, Sasha gets cornered by Misa in the castle. Then Misha appears to assist, so the two combine their powers to unleash the Necron family's secret technique, Chi-Glade, and wipe out their opponents instantly. As they relax, the ground begins to shake as Anos and Lei continue to go at it. Lei asks him if he's enjoying it, and Anos says it's been so long since someone has given it to him hard, and they continue to change positions. Then, Lei tries to get on top, but Anos stops him and wins as Lei tells him that he feels like he's met him before. So Anos tells him he's actually the Demon King, and they might have met 2,000 years before. Although Lei doesn't know if that's horseshit, they simply agree to go another round later. Back at home, his mom is happy to see that he's brought home a new bride, while he welcomes Misa to the team, saying that she's probably a descendant of the spirit of water and has potential. After dinner, his dad asks where Misa and Lei went, and he says they stepped out for a quickie, while his mom tells the girls how Anos was a miracle baby, and she's devoted her life to loving him. Outside, Misa thanks Lei for helping her get on the team, but he tells her that he should have gotten the whole team to join and apologizes, so she's surprised by his riz, and asks how he doesn't discriminate against hybrids, but he says all he cares about is his tool. Then he asks her if she ever feels run down, and when she says she's fine, he tells her that half spirits, half demons don't typically live long, and that she must be something special. The next day, Emilia announces that Lei and Anos have been chosen to participate in the Magic Sword Tournament and tells them to be prepared. Later, Anos tells Lei that something seems sus about their willingness to let him participate. But Misa interrupts and asks him if he'd like to meet with Melise, so he agrees, and she takes him to Melise, who immediately recognizes him and bows. Although he says his memories were also erased, he claims his source remembered him, and explains that after Anos sacrificed himself for the wall to be built, he suddenly found himself walking in a spirit forest without his memories. He then tells him it took him 100 years to cross over the wall into the demon side, after which he discovered that the name of the Demon King had been changed to Avos de Levia. So he urges Anos to drop out of the tournament to frustrate the enemy and possibly get him to reveal himself. Back at home, Anos finds Misha and his mom cooking dinner, and she tells him that Emilia had stopped by to assure them that the academy is in full support of his participation, which concerns him. So he tells her he's not sure he'll participate, but she gives him her best puppy dog eyes so he'd reconsider. After dinner, Anos thanks Stasha for the food, asking what she'd want in return, so she says she'd like him to take her out, and he agrees. The next day, they head to the magic model shop where she shows him her creation magic and asks if he'd like to try. So he creates a tiny replica of the town, and the shop owner tries to buy it from him. But he insists that he's got something special planned for it. Later, as they sit together, he makes it into a ring and puts it on her finger, and she asks him how she can repay him if he doesn't need her. But he explains that he's not omnipotent and is only the best at destroying things, meaning she could become better than him at creation magic. After, they visit a cat shop, where Avis appears as a cat and reports that Nullheis is not actually the leader of the Unitarians, but the real leader is hiding in the shadows. He also reports that another person of unknown identity is working at the magic clinic, but he hasn't discovered the link between the two, so Anos dismisses him to do some more digging. Then they head over to the clinic and stumble into Lei, who says he's visiting his mother, but when Anos offers to cure her, he declines and leaves, making Anos suspicious. Later, he heads to the tournament, and Avis updates him, clearing Nullheis from being involved in the tournament, but saying Gaios and Idol seem to be working behind the scenes. Then he reports that Lei's mother is truly in the hospital and has a rare critical disease called spirit disease, though they'd never heard of it. So Anos heads back, and the tournament begins as they announce the first swordsman, Krut, the strongest swordsman in the city and Emilia's older brother. But when they call for Anos, he doesn't show up. However, he remains hidden underneath with Misa, determined not to go out, but as the crowd starts to mock him for being a hybrid, his mom comes to his defense and tells them not to look down on him. At that moment, his dad arrives with a sword he'd been forging for the last few days, even causing him an injury to the head. So Anos feels moved by his parents' resolve and decides to compete. Then he jumps into the arena and tells Krut that he'd make up for wasting his time by defeating him in 1 minute. The match begins and Krut uses his ice sword to attack, but he easily evades each swing, as the Unitarians cheer for him with a song. Then he releases a special move, sending multiple attacks from his sword, but Anos defeats it with one swing and finally goes on the offensive. Then, with one strike, he sends multiple projectiles at Krut, which knock him out, ending his reign as the strongest swordsman and winning Anos the match. But this enrages Emilia, who watches as he walks off. Afterward, Anos and Misa watch from a room as Lei wins his match, and they announce that he's a member of a royalist organization. Then he joins them and reveals that he joined the organization after being offered loads of money and the role of the Demon Lord, saying he can no longer be associated with them. Then, as he turns to leave, he tells Anos that he's going to end him, so Anos tells him to bring it on, and Lei strikes with his sword as Anos goes for his chest, but they stop in a deadlock, with both unable to end the other. After Lei leaves, Anos says that he sensed the presence of magical gear inside his body, which he suspects is a contractual sword that will destroy his source under certain conditions, concluding that he may be a hostage. So he continues the tournament and wins his way into the finals. But this displeases the students, who bank on Lei to defeat him. Afterward, they congratulate him for making it to the finals and tell him to get some rest, but he says he has an errand to run, so his mom offers to hold on to his tool in the meantime, since he'll be unable to continue the tournament without it. Then he and Misa teleport to the hospital to see Lei's mom, and when he looks closer, he discovers that she's half demon, half spirit, like Misa, which means Lei couldn't have been raised by his biological parents. Just after saying this, she opens her eyes and confirms that Lei is working for the Royalists in an attempt to save her. So Anos offers to save her instead, but she explains that her source is rooted in tradition, and she has no idea what her tradition is. She then explains that Lei has always loved playing with his tool since he was a boy, but was sad from always winning until he met Anos, so she asks him to let her son go all out in giving it to him. Upon hearing this, he comes up with a spell to share Mrs. source with hers, but warns that they may both die in the process. However, Misa insists on continuing, so they begin the transfer process, but he says that she's likely to reach her limit before she's done. Meanwhile, Emilia catches up to his mom and the rest of the girls, offering to hold on to his sword, but when she refuses, she attacks her with a purple energy blast, knocking her down. As she sends another blast, the girls work together to hold her off, but they're blasted away instead, despite being her students. As Isabella looks on in horror, she sends another attack, but the girls come to her aid again, determined to give her enough time to run, but they end up getting barbecued. Just before she can add Isabella to the menu, Anos shows up and stops her, freezing her in place while he heals everyone and tells the girls he's indebted to them. Then he focuses on Amelia, and as he burns with rage, he grabs her neck and teleports them to the arena, where he stabs her in the back and tells her to acknowledge him and beg for her life. Although she puts on a pathetic display to save herself, he ends her with one strike and resurrects her as a hybrid. But when she tries to kill herself, he reveals that he put a curse on her to make sure she always comes back as a hybrid. Back at the hospital, Missa continues the spell, but Lei comes up behind her, holding a blade to her neck. But when he finds out what she's trying to do, he thanks her but knocks her out. Then his mom wakes up and tells him not to worry about her anymore as meeting him was enough to make her life happy, so he leaves. The next day, the finals begin and Anos and Lei finally get their rematch. But before they begin, the announcer explains that their match will follow special rules, causing special rings to appear on their wrists, and says that if the ring is destroyed, it will also result in a loss. Then an owl nearby tells Anos that his ring is programmed to end Shyla if the magic power being drained depletes, and if he wins, Lei will also be wiped out by the contractual sword. So the match begins, and Lei praises him for being able to keep up even though his magic's being drained, but he jumps back and violates his contract, causing the sword to pierce his source, so he can go out fighting with all he's got. So Anos acknowledges his wishes, and the two engage in a heated battle, even moving too fast for the audience to follow. Then in a bid to end the match, they both rush forward and Anos loses his arm, while Lei's sword breaks and gets stabbed through the chest. As he goes down, a magic circle appears and transports Anos to another dimension where he finds Melheis waiting for him, explaining that the ring already took more than half of his magic power and that he would be unable to recover his arm anytime soon. Then he summons Gaios and Idol and tells him he has no chance, but Anos says bitch please, causing Melheis to look back and see that the two elders have proven to be useless once again. Then Lei appears, revealing that Anos had destroyed the contractual sword, but Melheis opens another dimension, revealing Shyla trapped inside and tries to make a deal with Lei, but Anos tells him he can suck it and helps Lei distract him so he can get inside. However, Melheis opens up another dimension, releasing the same spell that Anos used to separate the world, that obliterates everything in its path. Although Anos uses his shield to block the attacks, Melheis reveals that it contains the magic power drained from Anos, assuring him he's a goner, but Anos remains confident and sends his severed arm at him. However, he dodges and walks into another dimension, while commending Anos on having his complete power, even though newly resurrected demons can usually only summon 10% of their power. When Anos asks where the f he is, he brags that while he's in his absolute space, he can't lose, so he sends the wall to Lei and his mother. But Anos creates a shield in that dimension to protect them. As he reaches his limit, he contacts Lei, who tells him to create a sword for him to use, so a sword appears in front of him, and he tries to slash the wall, but the sword breaks apart, leaving him discouraged. However, Shyla wakes up, remembering her true power, and uses the last of her energy to turn into a sword for her son to use, so he grabs his mom, and with one powerful thrust, he breaks through all the walls, even cutting across dimensions, but after she tells him she loves him and disappears. So Aldi's gets ready to retaliate when Anos shows up behind him, and as he wonders how the fuck he got inside his absolute space, he quickly sends the wall at him, trapping him as it explodes. However, Anos emerges unscathed and summons his demon sword, revealing that he had been at 10% of his power the entire time, but was finally able to recover his powers after his attack. So Anos uses the sword to break through his attack, which also slices him in half, and as he walks forward to end him, Melheis summons an infinite number of dimensions to stop him. But they're all destroyed in an instant. Then he stabs his head and finds that a parasite has been controlling him, so he destroys it, freeing Melheis, who tells him he was attacked after their last meeting. So he summons Gaios and Idol, whose sources have also been taken over, and resurrects them, restoring them to their original forms. At that moment, he sees a masked man watching from the shadows, but when he asks if he's Avos, he vanishes, so he retakes his place on stage, and when everyone unfreezes, he's pronounced the winner of the match, but he gives all the credit to his dad's sword, saying something other than magic power resides in his sword. After, he heals Lei and resurrects his mom, explaining that after figuring out her true form was a sword, he was able to pass on her tradition, giving him the ability to revive her. Later, Sasha comes out to present him with a commemorative gift and accompanies it with a kiss. 2,000 years ago, Anos met up with Kanon to discuss ending the war peacefully, but Jirga appeared, trying to attack, and warned him not to listen. As he received power from a nearby army, he tore through Anos' shields, seeking revenge for his wife and children, but as he tried to attack, Anos calmly pierced his heart, reminding him that humans also killed his mother, so he invited Kanon to his castle and left. After, he rushed over to Jirga, who told him to put everyone's mind at ease by defeating the Demon King, then he collapsed. In the present, a new homeroom teacher, Menu, replaces Amelia and announces that they'd be holding inter-academy classes in the next 3 weeks, and reveals that the venue would be in the Humans' Hero Academy. After everyone is surprised, she explains that although they had been planning joint classes, they suddenly received a go-ahead. So she explains that heroes were warriors that fought in the ancient wars, and used a magic spell similar to Gai's, and asks if anyone knows what it is. Of course, Anos can't help himself and tells the class that the humans call theirs Asla, and it involves the subordinates sharing their power with their leader, with extreme versions even converting their souls into magic power, using Ask. So after confirming this, she says their exam will test their Gai's against their Asla, and commends Anos for being knowledgeable. After class, the team meets to train with Anos, who shows them no mercy but points out their weaknesses and the areas they need to improve on. But as they all fall flat on their asses, they realize how much work they need to put in before facing the heroes and get back up to try again. Later he meets with Melhais, who confirms that Gaio's and Idol's sources were tampered with 2,000 years ago, so he assumes the remaining 3 demon emperors are still under Avo's control. However, he wonders why Melhai's source was not affected like the rest. Then Melhais warns him to be careful at the inter-academy classes, saying that there's something fishy about the fact that the humans are still training heroes when there's no war. Anos notices Lei outside, then he shows him around his weapons vault, allowing him to pick any sword that he likes, so he picks out a sword that used to belong to Kanon, and when he finds out that he might be his reincarnation, he keeps the sword. Later, the students receive instructions to travel to the human realm for the next 10 days, as failure to reach there in that time would cause them to be ineligible. As they're about to set out, the group tries to decide on the best route, but Anos snaps his fingers and teleports them there instantly. Since they have time to kill, they split up, and Sasha follows Anos to do some digging in town, and as they look around, he tells her he wants to check out the Hero Academy. But after realizing they're alone, he takes the opportunity to razz her up, reminding her that her eyes are the most beautiful he's ever seen, making him want her, so she agrees to give it to him later to prove she's not a child. Afterward, they head to the Hero Academy, where they meet Eleanor, who offers to show them around, so she takes them to a library and shows them a book about how Kanon defeated the Demon King of Tyranny and erected the walls. But when Sasha tries to tell her that's horseshit, Anos tells her it was the only way for the humans to rest easy. So he asks Eleanor who the Demon King was, but when she also says Avos, he realizes they were also affected, and asks if Kanon is a part of the reincarnated heroes. So she tells him there are 4 Kanon reincarnations, and when he asks if they're aware of their flawed history, Ledriano, one of the reincarnations, suddenly interrupts and tells him that he just needs to face the facts. Immediately, Laos shows up too, claiming to be one of the reincarnations, but after one look at them, Anos tells them they're too weak to be Kanon's reincarnation. This angers Laos, who rushes forward to attack him, but is tossed aside just by Anos' blink, proving his point, so Ledriano tells Laos to take his L and asks Anos to withdraw for now, but asks for his name before he leaves. Outside, Eleanor asks him if he's also a reincarnation, and when he confirms this, she tells him that the version of Kanon he must have known became altered after being murdered by a human 2,000 years ago. 10 days later, the rest of the students arrive, barely able to stand from exhaustion, and after Menat tells them Anos and his team arrived the same day they left, they realize why they're only side characters. So the team heads inside and Misha points out that Eleanor looks sad, while the Kanon reincarnations watch them from above. Later, Anos gets approached by the third years, and Rivest asks him how he cheated to get there in 1 day. But after Anos tells him not to be salty since he made it in 2 days, he apologizes but refuses to accept him as the Demon King. Afterward, class begins and Diego, the headmaster of the Hero Academy, introduces himself and nominates Ledriano to display hero magic, while Meta nominates Reves to display demon magic. So Ledriano goes first, casting Lid on a worn-out sword to restore it. But when Reves tries to use his demon magic on a mouse, he finds that he's unable to activate it. So Anos interrupts and reveals that Ledriano used a second spell to seal Reves' magic, and undoes it with a snap of his fingers, causing the mouse to grow into a terrifying monster. Then he uses Lid to dispel the monsters and generate a holy sword, which shocks Diego. Then Ledriano guesses that he's the reincarnation of the Demon King, but the students from the Demon Academy refuse to accept that a hybrid could be his reincarnation, and an argument breaks out. Later that night, Evis reports that there's no record of Canaan being killed by a human, but he found a prophecy that said that darkness would one day consume their land, but the legendary hero would rise again, with the spirit god-human sword and illuminate the world. So they figure out that the humans are expecting Canaan to defeat him with that special sword. Then he hears a knock and finds Misha and Sasha, who take him out to a festival to celebrate Jurga's rebirth. But they spot Lei and Misa having some alone time, and Sasha stops Anos from spoiling their plot. Meanwhile, Lei thanks Misa for helping out with his mom, and shows his appreciation by winning her a special necklace and giving it to her. The next day, as the girls ask her who the mystery man is, Anos tells him that kind of necklace is usually given to one's lover, commending him on his raise. Later, the two academies meet up, but Anos notices Eleanor is absent while Diego announces that each team is to use their troop magic in the underwater cities and caverns. Then he announces they'd be sending their elite class, and tells Mena not to send more pathetic losers to compete. So the students discuss with her, and she almost picks Anos' team, but Rivest asks him to allow the side characters to have some screen time, so he agrees. As the exam begins, Mena tells Anos that Rivest used to be a miserable loser who hated the founder, but changed his mind after she told him that the founder only wanted to protect his people. Meanwhile, the demon students build their castle, but discover that the rest of their magic is malfunctioning. So Rivest sends them out to observe the other school, but they get wiped out by the Canaan reincarnations. As the rest of the students watch from the beach, Anos lends Mena his eyes and shows her that they've been sabotaged with holy water, which makes heroes stronger and demons weaker, giving the heroes an endless supply of power. As the heroes approach the castle, Rivest orders them to fire their cannons, but they protect against the blast with their protective barriers. Then, Ledriano casts a spell above the castle that sucks away their magic power, destroying their castle, while Haynes sends a powerful attack, which causes the broadcast to end. So Mena tells Diego to get the students out of there, but he casually says he sent for help, but they may take a while. So Anos casts a spell that extracts the students from the lake, but when Mena rushes to heal Revest, Diego explains that he has a stigma, which is a severe wound from holy magic that cannot be healed. Then she calls him out for letting his students use such dangerous magic, but the bastard says it's not his fault that her students are weaklings, so Anos offers to heal him. But when he tries to refuse, he tells him to stop his bitching for Mena's sake. So he calms down and shows him the magical gear they've been using to cheat, and leaves the rest to Anos. So they approach the heroes and propose a second round since they cheated using holy water. But the heroes taunt them, saying they should drain the lake if they're so scared, but Anos takes it literally and summons a huge ball of flames that vaporizes the entire lake, telling the trio to face them. After shitting his pants, Diego tries to cancel the exam, but the heroes ignore him and proceed, as Ledriano tells him they plan on using a secret weapon. As the teams prepare to face off, Sasha tells Anos to set up the guys only for appearances, as they'd prefer to fight with their own power, while the heroes remain confident since they believe that the Demon King was inferior to Canaan, and that they hear Canaan telling them to end the demons. So Anos sends a giant fiery ball toward them, but a protective barrier activates, and a mysterious hero appears and dispels his magic. When they realize that they can't advance without taking care of the barrier, Misha suggests creating a castle within the barrier. So Anos teleports her inside, and she begins to build the castle while he faces the heroes. Then he asks about the fourth hero, but Ledriano says she can't speak and introduces her as Zeshia, another reincarnation, who would use her sword to destroy the castle. So the other three heroes launch simultaneous attacks, which end up chaining Anos, but as they laugh, Anos releases a spell that destroys the chains and causes an explosion, but Zeshia charges forward and gets tossed aside by another huge explosion. After Misha successfully finishes the castle, Sasha appears in front of Laos and introduces herself as the Witch of Destruction, while Lei faces Hein. Meanwhile, Lao sends multiple magic blasts at Sasha, who escapes and flies past him. And when he tries to attack again, he notices that she stole his school badge. So he rushes forward to retrieve it, and after an ice magic attack, he takes it back and casts a barrier spell with multiple balls of energy. But when he rushes to deal the final blow, he suddenly stops and coughs out blood, falling to the ground. Then Sasha says that he must be an idiot for thinking she'd return the gear without tampering with it, and reveals that she used poison magic on it. However, he tells her that she'd still have to deal with his barrier magic, but she destroys it instantly, telling him to put some respect on her name, and she uses her demonic eyes on him. At the same time, Hein traps Lei in a barrier to restrain his power, while he summons a holy sword, hoping to leave him with a stigma. But Lei slices off his arm, then he picks up the holy sword, which should be impossible for a demon, and sends an earth-shattering strike, stealing the other sword too. As Hein tries to beg for mercy, Lei decides to give him a stigma, which is more merciful than death. Meanwhile, Anos faces Ledriano and tells him to face him fair and square, so he agrees and summons an ocean sword. But Zeshia tries to attack from behind and releases an impressive series of attacks, which manage to break through his shields, but he tosses her like the rag doll she is, and throws her at him. Then they cast Asla, and the people from town lend them their souls, allowing them to use Ask, and Ledriano explains that it's even more powerful than he remembers, because their numbers have increased from about 100,000 to 10 million. So they attack and easily break through Ano's defenses and defeat his attacks, pushing him back. But when they try to attack again, he shields himself with an Ask of his own. When Ledriano asks how the fuck he's able to use their troop magic, he explains that demons also have love to share and tells the Unitarians to send in their love while singing. As he receives their power, they try to attack, but Anos defeats them easily, and when Ledriano asks how 8 girls could possibly beat out 10 million people, he tells him that the quality of the souls that he used was trash. This angers him, and immediately a voice tells everyone to end Anos, and begins to brainwash the girls, but Anos stops it, just as Ledriano activates a spell on Zeshia. So she flies toward him and stabs her source, causing an enormous explosion, but Anos remains untouched. However, she continues to respawn, and when he grabs her source to destroy her, he sees an image of Eleanor, telling him to meet her at the shrine as she's the only one who can stop Zeshia. So while he holds her down, he sends Misha to the shrine, but she's attacked by Diego, who unleashes a spell that breaks her barrier and stabs her multiple times. As he tries to destroy her source, Anos shows up, stabs him, and flings him aside, while he rushes to Misha and puts a protective wall around her. Then he heads back to Diego and asks him what is going on, but when he refuses to talk, he transforms him into a monster, revealing what he's really like on the inside. But Diego casts a spell to make the heroes destroy the demons, but when it doesn't work, Anos explains that he froze time at the lake, rips his source out of his chest, and destroys it. So he takes Misha, and they head to a room where they find Eleanor floating in an orb, and when he asks her who she is, she says she's magic. Then she explains that she was created with taboo magic that changes humans into magic, and was responsible for maintaining the barrier and healing their wounds, and offers to stop Diego's spell if he lets her out. So he destroys her orb, and she releases the heroes from the spell and begins to tell Anos about the school, explaining that she's been creating source clones, which is why Zeshia appeared to keep coming back, and that this form of magic started 2,000 years ago with Jurga, who created the academy to pass on his hatred for the demons, spreading his plan to kill them through Ask. Then she shows him a memory of Kanon disapproving of Jurga's plan, resulting in him being stabbed in the back, literally, and says that it was the last time Kanon resurrected himself. After explaining that she's also a result of Jurga's magic, and has been creating clones for 2,000 years just to send them to die, she asks him to destroy her. Before he can grant her wish, another Diego clone barges in with his guards, but they hear an explosion and find Meadow and Zoro Eldora, the remaining demon emperors, guarding a masked demon. The demon takes out Kanon's holy sword, to Diego's surprise, and he sends a vortex to suck up the men's miserable existence. When Anos asks him who he is, he says he's Avos, and claims to be the Demon King. So Anos sends his fireball at him, but Avos cuts through it and sends a counterattack, which Anos dispels with his eyes. Then Avos says he's going to transform the world into the true world of demons and disappears. A few days later, Diego announces to the humans that the prophecy has come true, and that the Demon King will be leading an invasion of the human realm. At the same time, the three demon emperors inform the demons that Avos has been resurrected, and then he tells them that he seeks to correct the mistake of letting the humans go 2,000 years ago, and asks the strongest warriors to help him annihilate them. Meanwhile, Anos discusses with the remaining demon emperors, and they inform him that the demon and human armies are heading toward each other, so they agree to fight with him. Then the rest of the group shows up to join in, and they agree to leave at daybreak. The next morning, Lei comforts Misa about the upcoming battle, and when she thinks she's about to get some for the battle, he takes half of her necklace, promising to come back to her. Afterward, Anos gives them their orders and sends Sasha and Misha to stop the troops in the west, while the fangirls support the rearguard, and Lei and Misa take out the troops in the east. So, Anos tells the demon emperors to take on the remaining three while he faces Avos. But when he reaches the castle, Misa calls out to him to say Lei has disappeared, while Naldis tells him the sources of the remaining three demon emperors have also disappeared. When Anos realizes that he's not in the castle, he finds him in an open field and creates a barrier to seal him inside. So Avos summons his sword, and the two exchange blows when Anos notices something under his clothes. Then Anos tells him it's been a while and calls him Kanan, but after revealing the necklace he took from him, he calls him Lei instead. So Anos asks him what the fuck this whole plot has been about, and Lei tells him that after he was murdered by Jurga's followers, he knew they created a plan to destroy Anos 2,000 years later, and wanted to prevent that from happening. So he used his sword to nullify Anos' destiny as Demon King, causing him to be erased from history. Then he passed himself off as Demon King, hoping to sacrifice himself to the humans and finally dispel Jurga's curse of revenge. However, Anos calls his plan a dumbass plan and is determined to stop it. So Lei charges forward and tries to slash him, but he flies up and sends multiple meteors at him, taking out one source. Then Lei jumps in the air to attack, but he penetrated him with the dark wall, taking out another source. Then he summons a great wave that drowns him and takes out a third source. Then Lei emerges from behind and manages to wound him, but he uses Geograze, which burns him and takes out the fourth and fifth sources. But Lei dispels Geograze, but before he can counter, Anos grabs the sixth source and destroys it, leaving him with his final source as he falls to the ground. However, he gets up more determined than before and summons another sword, going toe-to-toe with Anos till he casts a giant fireball. But when Lei cuts through it, he ends up piercing Anos' core, just as he wears Avos' mask and lowers the barrier for the humans to see. Then Anos tells the demons not to seek revenge on the humans, but to carry on living till he resurrects again, while Lei acknowledges that Anos was always his true hero, as Anos falls to his death. So Lei tells them the Demon King has fallen, and the demons agree to retreat. But Diego refuses to accept the outcome, claiming Lei couldn't possibly be Kanan's reincarnation since he's a demon. So he orders his Zeshia troops to self-destruct and wipe out the demons, but Eleanor appears and tells him there's no point. But as he continues to insist, he starts to look like something out of a nightmare and transforms into an Ask that sucks the souls of the hero army and creates a giant version of Jurga. So Lei tries to nullify the Ask, but when he fails, he tells him that a holy sword cannot cut through sacred magic. Then Sasha and Misha fly up to face him, and Ivis helps them combine into one form. So Jurga tries to take them out, but they evade all his attacks. So he casts a giant magic circle to cause the Zeshia dolls to self-destruct, but they send giant chains to restrain the magic, while Lei and Misa work together to take out the other Zeshia dolls. However, despite all their efforts, Jurga still gains the upper hand and detonates them, but just before everything is wiped out, Anos appears and stops them, revealing that he resurrected with origin magic since he's been killed by Kanan before. So Jurga casts an even larger Ask and forces power from the people to transform into his ultimate form, but as he attacks, Lei blocks him and teams up with Anos to take him on. As Lei attacks, he blasts him away, while Anos tries to hold him down with fire ropes, but he breaks free and blasts him away too, reminding him that he's lost too much magic power from resurrecting. So Anos tells the fangirls to do their thing and they begin to sing, giving him their power, while Jurga summons thousands of swords to rain down on them. Then Eleanor creates a shield to protect the people, while the demons help to carry the wounded humans to safety, after finally acknowledging Anos as the true Demon King. As the humans and demons work together, Anos tries to knock some sense into Jurga and show him that this is the peace he's always wanted, but as he resists, Lei reappears and slices him in half, nullifying his destiny. Then the two of them fly up and charge toward him, evading his attacks and cutting through his barrier till they finally destroy him, and he reunites with his dead wife and kid. Afterward, the girls reunite with Anos, happy that he survived, while Lei reunites with Misa, hoping to get some after the battle. Then, Anos finds Eleanor and changes her magic to his own, saving her and her 10,000 Zeshia kids, while the rest of the people celebrate and acknowledge Anos. Later, he heads home with the girls, bringing Eleanor along, and his mom is shocked to discover yet another bride, who is a baby mom of 10,000 kids. Will Anos finally face an opponent he can't beat? Let us know if you want part 2 by commenting Demon King of Tyranny in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you guys in the next video.